Hello everyone. I am here at the Weaver River. Decided to go for a little nature walk today. My class that I normally teach at this time was canceled just because a lot of people are out on vacation or doing other things right now. And so I thought I would go for a walk and bring along this book that I started reading. And while I was going for my walk, I thought, hey, why not do another little mini book review? So I'm here at the riverbank, and there are lovely birds and frogs everywhere, and it's one of my favorite places to be. So I'm glad I can share that with you. So the book that I just started, I have not completed it yet, is this book that I found on the heels of Lindsay Wei's book, and it's called The Inner Teachings of Taoism, and it's by Shangpo Tuan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Shangpo Tuan. And this book is really fascinating to me on a variety of levels. My husband has been really interested in Western alchemy for quite some time. I remember about, I would say maybe 6 or 7 years ago, he came up with this idea of retelling the alchemical wedding, which is a very old Western alchemical text. And when he mentioned that he was interested in doing that, I purchased this book for him. It's called The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz. And this is kind of like one of the main texts in Western alchemy. And so for the past 6 years, he has been hard at work at retelling this story in our modern times. And I gotta say, having been privy to some of the early stuff and what he's currently working on, like the novel in the works, it's really fascinating, and I can't wait for him to finish it. And I think that this may be like the big work of all the things he's ever written thus far. It's fantastic. I'm really excited for it. But the reason that I brought this book along to complement the Inner Teachings of Taoism is that in the Inner Teachings of Taoism, I'm noticing all of these similarities between the inner alchemy of the East and the alchemy of the West. Now, if any of you have ever attempted to read this book, it is really weird. Even like coming from a metaphorical tradition and loving symbolism and always looking for the deeper meaning hidden behind images, this book is difficult. It's really weird. There's all these strange processes of, you know, wedding dragons and green lions pouring forth and all manner of strangeness, but this is all a metaphor for inner processes going on inside the body and the human psyche. And so the transmutation of the lead into gold is really a metaphor for transforming our sort of base, gross body and the base, gross animalistic nature of being a mammal into something spiritual, into something divine, into something higher. And that is the child that comes forth at the end of the wedding of the opposites. So the reason that I wanted to talk about this book before I get to the Inner Teachings is that it's the same theory. So different cultural inflection, same idea, and they're coming from completely different parts of the world, but as I've said before, truth is truth. It's going to shine forth everywhere because it's coming out of us and it's coming to us, and so our different cultures are going to inflect it a little differently, but it's all the same core principle. the deep, deep elementary ideas that are just sort of peppered over with the cultural inflection. So this is the Western text for alchemy, and I'm just barely delving into these traditions of the East. So this in itself is brand new for me, but I couldn't help but notice the similarities in these two texts. So in the inner teachings of Taoism, it's coming from a very old tradition in China. The introduction goes into a lot of talk about this, but again, it's this idea of cultivating inner alchemy. Now, there are alchemists both in the East and the West who actually deal in these materials, and they put it in a cauldron and they cook it and torture it and do all kinds of strange things to it to transform it. But while they're actually physically doing these things, there's this idea that some sort of transformation is taking place inside the alchemists at the same time. Now, this first part is sort of the directions and the ingredients for the physical process. And then the author explains how that's also a transmutation on the inside. So the inner teachings start with things like true earth arrests true lead controls true mercury, lead and mercury return to true earth, body and mind are tranquil and still. And then there's lots of other things where it talks about putting stuff in the cauldron and the jade dragon will emerge, and there's a jade rabbit and a gold raven, and this is all sort of the same really strange imagery that shows up in the chemical wedding too. So again, different traditions, same imagery. It's just shining through. I love this kind of stuff. I love when I see overlap between two seemingly different cultures. They have so much alike. It's fascinating to me. Let's see, what's some of the, oh, like this. This one's interesting. The raven's liver and the rabbit's marrow. Grab them and put them back in one place, grain after grain, from vagueness to clarity. Again, all metaphors. And if you're not used to reading things metaphorically, it's going to seem really strange to you when you're first coming across this stuff. Or at least it did to me when I was younger and when I was very first encountering these things. I love this end part though of the ingredients and the direction. When husband and wife mate, clouds and rain form in the secret room. In a year they give birth to a child and each rides on a crane. So all of this is metaphor for deeper spiritual processes. And I haven't read all of this book yet, so once I finish it, I'm going to talk more about it because I find it really fascinating. But I'm going to read you some of the explanatory verses because this is something that's missing from the Chemical Wedding, obviously because it's a medieval text, and I'm sure there's lots of scholars who have done work on that, but I haven't read it. I'm sure Adrian has. But in reading this inner teachings of Taoism and about the inner alchemy, I like that there's this explanatory text by the author. So I'm going to read you some of these verses because I think they're really pretty, and then I'll leave you with it. It's just beautiful. I like to share poetic images and words, so that's what I'm doing today. Okay, here's some of the explanatory verses. So less golden raven stuff and more just the explanation of what this process is. True intent arouses real knowledge. Conscious knowledge also spontaneously responds. The three join as one, and at once body and mind are settled. The empty room produces light. In quietude, yang is restored. Gather it and diligently refine it, transforming it into violet gold frost. In the spiritual opening, the light of wisdom arises. Essence appears and feelings about objects vanish. Clear and bright the jewel that glows in the dark. Everywhere is bright and clean. Volatility transmutes into true essence. The human mind changes into the mind of Tao. Without refinement by the spiritual fire, how can gold be separated from the ore? Real knowledge and conscious knowledge, these two are originally the same energy. Subjected to refinement by fire, they merge without a trace of defect. In the occult opening, real consciousness appears. Take the opportunity to get to work to nurture it. When essence and sense cleave to one another, they always produce the material for the elixir. There is an opening of open awareness, which is called the opening of the mysterious female. Therein are stored spirit and energy, originally the root of the celestial and earthly souls. Okay, I'm going to stop here for just 1 second. Because in the yogic tradition and in Hinduism, there's this concept of Shiva and Shakti. This has its mirror in the East with the yin-yang symbol. So one is active and one is the consciousness. In the Hindu tradition, Shiva is the consciousness, and what pours forth from him is Shakti, and she is the active force. So all life comes from her, but the conscious process that awakens the activity is Shiva. So male, female, they need one another in order to create the universe, to create the phenomenal world. And in Kundalini Yoga, there's this idea that you want to unite Shakti, the energy at the base of the spine, with Shiva, which is the consciousness which hovers overhead. So when I was reading this bit about the mysterious female, my mind immediately went to Shakti, the Shakti power. So the root of the celestial and earthly souls are coming from this yin-yang principle and the Shiva-Shakti principle, or at least that's the way I'm interpreting it. Conscious knowledge is the vitality within fire. Real knowledge is the jewel within water. When negativity within water and fire vanishes, the light is brilliant, truly sound. The spiritual remedy is inherent in oneself. What is the need to seek it outside? This is a very different idea that the East has cultivated as opposed to the West. Which is not to say that it didn't exist in the West, because I believe that it did. Because if you look at the native traditions which were in Europe in the pre-Christian times, and also a lot of the Gnostic texts, there's this emphasis on the internal as being the source of spirit versus the external. And they've really perfected this in the East. So, I don't know if I'm going to read too much more of this to you, because it's kind of long. But it's really beautiful. It's all about controlling the mind, melding mind, body, and spirit, and that is the elixir. That is the gold that's coming from the base lead. But it's the same principle of the Western alchemy as well. So it can actually be interpreted as a literal direction for creating gold out of lead. Or it can be taken metaphorically as a transformation of the soul, this inner alchemy, or both. There's some argument about whether or not the two go together, or if they can be done separately, or if that's even possible. But I just found it fascinating, and I thought I'd share I'm going to read you the last 3 because I think they're really pretty, and then I'll leave you with that. Essence and sense merge, real and conscious knowledge join, with fierce refinement and gentle cooking, a crystal clear temple is produced inside. Controlling the mind is called bathing. Incubation involves extraction and addition, at every moment forestall danger. As accomplishment deepens, you naturally enter the mystery. When you understand the principle of yin and yang, the spiritual embryo is not hard to form, producing a child, also producing grandchildren. Eternal life never ends. I love it. It's so pretty. And so the rest of the book is going into deeper explanation of each one of these processes. And I can't wait to finish it. Perhaps when I get done with the whole book, I'll review the thing in its entirety. But the reason I wanted to talk about it immediately right now is just that I was noticing so many similarities between this book and this book. East, west. And they're both saying the same thing. So we're more alike than we put on. Or I always look for the places where we overlap. Some people want to emphasize the differences. I think that moving forward, now that we're a global community, looking at the places where we're the same is going to be far more important than looking at all the ways that we're different. As Bruce Lee said, we're all children under the same heaven. So I'm going to leave you with that. I'm going to spend some time with this lovely river and all these beautiful birds singing and this lovely day. And I hope you all are enjoying yourselves out there and bringing harmony and balance into your lives in your own ways. And I love you. Bye-bye.